You move through the room unnoticed, a shadow threading itself between the laughter and the boasting. No one feels your presence, yet the air shifts when you linger. A pause here, a glance there, and suddenly, the carefully constructed armor of someone else's confidence begins to tremble. You do not speak, you do not accuse. You are the quiet gravity that draws doubt into the cracks of their mind, the cold reflection they never asked to see. Their smirk falters, their posture slackens. And it is not your hand that strikes, it is your existence, precise and unyielding, a reminder that power can be wielded without force. Every subtle movement is a silent decree, a message encoded in the rhythm of your breathing, the tilt of your head, the delay in acknowledgement. You are the eye in the storm, observing and calibrating, while around you the chaos of insecurity begins to coil. They do not understand why their certainty feels thin, why the ground beneath their words shivers. You are not their enemy. You are the mirror they refuse to hold up, the reflection of their own doubts magnified. There is a thrill in this, ancient, timeless, like the knowledge of a predator walking unseen through the dense undergrowth, unseen but fully aware of every heartbeat, every twitch, every imperfection. The silence you maintain is louder than any confrontation could be. You stretch it between moments, a chasm of absence that forces them to look inward, to question, to unravel. Every laugh that falls flat, every hesitation they cannot name, every flicker of uncertainty is a ripple caused by the weight of your presence. You do not chase it, you do not provoke it. You exist alongside it, patient and unblinking, watching as the structures of arrogance and self-assurance weaken under the quiet authority you carry. And in that quiet, something ancient stirs, a knowing buried in the marrow of human instincts that some forces cannot be touched, some truths cannot be resisted. You are that force. You are the invisible strike, the shadow that moves behind the veil of consciousness, shaping the battlefield before it is ever seen. There is a power in restraint, a clarity in observation, a profound weight in being present without being known. Every fleeting doubt, every whispered uncertainty, every silent question they cannot voice is a testament to the unseen dominion you wield. The room moves on, oblivious to what has already changed. But you know, and that knowing alone is enough to shift the world. You see it in the way they move, the subtle arrogance that drips from every gesture, as if the world itself owes them acknowledgement, confidence. They wear it like a shield, polished and impenetrable, but beneath the surface lies a fragile architecture, fragile as glass carved by hands that tremble with doubt. Every smile, every nod, every word carefully chosen to display dominance is a veneer. You know it because you have felt it yourself, the gnawing void behind the bravado, the hunger for validation that even power cannot satiate. You observe it in them, not from distance, but from the intimate proximity of awareness, like standing behind a mask no one else sees. Their confidence is built in layers, each more brittle than the last. It starts with fear disguised as certainty, an ancient survival mechanism cloaked in modern formality. You notice the cracks that form when pride demands attention and reality whispers a different truth. Even the most commanding voices falter when confronted by a subtle question, an eyebrow raised, a silence held just long enough to remind them of their own mortality. You can sense the tension in the air, a psychic current they cannot name, and suddenly the fortress begins to tremble. It is not your strength that topples them, but their own inability to reconcile image with reality. You recognize the power of observation, the ability to read the rhythm of uncertainty, the faint tremor behind a practiced laugh, the hesitation in a handshake. Confidence is performative, and you are the audience no one asked for. Your presence alone, calculated and restrained, highlights the gaps between their illusion and their truth. You feel it in the pause between words and the shadow behind a gaze, the way a perfectly rehearsed story falters when met with subtle contradiction. And in that moment, a shift occurs, silent, invisible, and irreversible. The armor begins to warp under its own weight. You understand that confidence is not absence of fear. It is its concealment, its suppression, beneath layers of ritual and expectation. You see how easily it can be unraveled by the smallest deviations, the slightest crack in perception, the quiet suggestion that perhaps they are not who they think they are. Every gesture you witness, every unspoken thought you perceive, is a lever waiting to pry apart their constructed certainty. They have built their towers of control on sand, and the tides of scrutiny are patient, unyielding, relentless. You hold the tide in your hand without ever reaching out, and the revelation is as ancient as it is contemporary. Power and vulnerability share the same pulse. You do not need to strike. You only need to stand in the space of awareness, in the shadow that stretches longer than they can see, and let the architecture of their pride collapse under the weight of its own contradiction. Every measured glance, every word left unsaid, becomes a chisel against the walls they thought invincible. You witness it, not as predator, but as sentinel, as one who understands the delicate equilibrium between fear and control, between presence and absence. Their confidence is a story you read in silence, a narrative of fragility disguised as strength, and in the quiet of that revelation, you feel the power of being the only one who knows the truth. Every word you speak or withhold becomes a thread tugging at the edges of someone else's certainty. You lean back in silence, and suddenly the room shifts. The confidence they carried, the armor they wore, begins to rattle under invisible fingers. You ask a question, precise and measured, and watch it linger in the air. It's not the question itself that unsettles them. It's the pause that follows, a subtle crack in the veneer they didn't know existed. Their gaze flickers, searching for footing that isn't there. You are a shadow at the edge of their perception, a presence they cannot name, a weight they cannot measure. A smile, almost imperceptible, is enough to fracture them. Not cruel, not mocking, but the kind that suggests you know a truth they have yet to face. Every micro expression becomes a mirror, reflecting not your intention, but their insecurities magnified. Their thoughts spiral, quiet at first, then louder, louder, until their own mind feels foreign. You do not touch, you do not speak louder, yet you wield the precision of a blade forged in silence. Timing is your ally. The moment they reach for reassurance, you retract. When they search for validation, you offer none. The vacuum you create becomes a space for doubt, fertile ground for their collapse. You notice patterns in their speech, the way they hesitate before certain words, the flicker of recognition in their eyes when a hidden fear is nudged. Each observation is a strategy, each glance a pivot. They are maps, their weaknesses traced in the most intimate topography of human behavior, and you read it like scripture written in trembling flesh. There is an elegance here, in the orchestration of subtle sabotage, the kind that leaves no visible wounds, but etches deep, permanent lines. You are not chaos, you are inevitability. They move, they react, yet always to a rhythm you dictate, a cadence they cannot resist. Silence is your canvas, and suggestion your brush. A raised brow, a tilt of the head, a question that drips with ambiguity. These are strokes that paint them smaller, dimmer, less certain. They search for you in the void, imagining your intentions where none exist. Because the human mind cannot abide a presence it cannot define. You do not accelerate, you wait. You watch the subtle fractures deepen, the cracks in their confidence widening like ancient fault lines, and you remain still. Power is not in confrontation, but in control unseen, in the collapse that comes not from force, but from careful orchestration. And as the room tightens around them, as their thoughts loop in restless circles, you realize that this is no mere game. This is transformation, an evolution of your own presence into something both feared and revered. Each hesitation you provoke, each shadow you cast, leaves them reshaped. They will never know the hand that moved them, the quiet intelligence that bent the air around them. Yet their world is different now. They are smaller, unsure, exposed. You are larger, precise, untouchable. You are the force they cannot see, the quiet storm that bends minds without leaving footprints. Every subtle sabotage is a pulse, and you are the heartbeat. You see them before you, unaware of the fracture forming within. Their eyes, once certain, now dart like hunted animals, searching for stability that no longer exists. Every word you've spoken lingers in their mind, bending reality until they question the truth of their own experience. You do not touch them. You do not raise your voice. You simply reflect their own thoughts back at them, carefully fractured, like a shard of glass held against the sun. The reflection is imperfect, yet it carries weight. They catch themselves in it and feel a subtle tremor, a hesitation they cannot name. Doubt seeps through the cracks, slow and inevitable, until the edifice of their confidence begins to crumble under its own shadow. You watch them rewrite themselves in your presence, bending to the contours of your silence, reshaping their identity without realizing the hand guiding the change. Mirrors do not lie, but they reveal more than surfaces. They expose intentions, weaknesses, the small betrayals even they did not see coming. You give them nothing to fight against, nothing to deflect, and in that nothingness, they encounter themselves. Their strength becomes visible only because they can feel it slipping. Every glance, every thought, every hesitation you provoke is a silent accusation, a reminder that the power they assumed was theirs to command was always fragile, always conditional. You do not need to speak. The smallest pause, the briefest look, and the seed of unease takes root. The air shifts around you, heavy and expectant, like a temple abandoned yet still resonant with echoes of ancient ritual. There is a cosmic justice in this reflection, a sense that what you do is older than thought itself. You are the observer of their unraveling, the keeper of a quiet, almost sacred authority. When they stumble over their own words, when they falter mid-step in social space, the illusion shatters entirely. They confront themselves for the first time, and it is unbearable. The weight of their own contradictions, the exposure of private failures, the invisible betrayals they cannot reconcile, all converge into a moment so raw it burns. You do not act. You merely remain present, a shadow in their periphery, a catalyst for the chaos that only they can feel. In that mirror, they see everything they hide from themselves. They see the doubts they swore were non-existent, the insecurities they masked with arrogance, the tiny compromises that have always dictated their choices. You have become a prism through which they encounter truth, too sharp to handle. And in this confrontation, they are unarmed. There is no one to blame but themselves, yet you hover like a silent storm, and they know it. Every hesitation, every falter, every slight misstep is amplified, reflected back with exact precision, until they are left exposed. A soul laid bare by their own reflection, trembling under the weight of an unspoken judgment they cannot escape. You feel it first in the air, the absence of sound pressing against your chest, heavier than any spoken word could ever be. The room breathes around you, but nothing emerges from the mouths that once filled it with noise, with arrogance, with the certainty that they were untouchable. Your silence is not emptiness, it is gravity pulling at the foundations they thought were unshakable. Every pause, every measured inaction, becomes a weapon sharper than any insult, sharper than any glance. You do not strike, you let the world strike itself against the walls you have built in quiet. They flinch before they know they are vulnerable. Their own thoughts betray them. It begins in microseconds, a hesitation, a faltering smile, a question left hanging like a dagger in midair. You do not speak, you do not clarify, you do not yield. And yet the room tilts, the atmosphere warps, and the echo of your restraint becomes louder than their certainty. They begin to search for something familiar, something tangible to hold on to, and find nothing but the cold weight of their own doubts. What they perceive as inaction is in fact orchestration. Each tick of the clock reverberates with the authority you exert without gesture. Their confidence, once a roaring fire, dims beneath the shadow of your quiet presence. You watch them unravel in ways they cannot name. Their assumptions crumble like ancient walls in an unseen earthquake. They reach for validation in your eyes, for reassurance in the spaces between your words, and find only reflection, your calm mirrored against their panic. The very silence that seems passive is alive with intent, a pulse that measures their weakness and exposes it to the cold light of inevitability. Their own minds become adversaries, planting fears and contradictions where certainty once resided. You do not need to speak, you do not need to act. You are already present in the spaces they ignore, a silent observer and a quiet predator intertwined in the same shadow. And yet, the power is not in domination. It is in restraint. You hold the storm within yourself while the chaos grows outside, knowing that the world will unravel under its own hubris. You are the unseen tide, patient and ancient, moving against the shorelines of arrogance and entitlement. Silence is no absence, it is an edict. Every pause becomes a verdict. Every glance that does not turn into comment becomes a sentence they cannot appeal. Their fear is born from your stillness, a recognition they cannot voice, a truth that hammers against the walls of their mind that the most formidable power is often the one that never announces itself. You become a shadow in their periphery, a presence they cannot measure, a force they cannot anticipate. Their chaos swells, yet your calm persists, a dark rhythm in the background, pulsing with inevitability. They may attempt to fill the void with noise, with feigned courage, with desperate rationalizations, but the silence has already claimed its dominion. It is not just absence, it is transformation. Their weakness crystallizes in the space you occupy without a sound, and in that quiet you are absolute. You step into the space between thought and action, where their mind is a quiet battlefield and you are the shadow at its center. You do not move loud. You do not announce your presence. They speak and you listen. Every hesitation, every flicker of doubt is a whisper you catch, a thread you tug, unseen but undeniable. They believe they are alone, safe behind their carefully constructed walls, yet you glide through the cracks, the gaps they never noticed, planting seeds of uncertainty. You watch them question themselves, their certainty bleeding away in slow, deliberate increments. Each word you leave unsaid is a blade suspended, each glance a mirror showing their reflection fractured and unfamiliar. You are not cruel. You are elemental, a storm that has existed long before they walked into the room, and it watches silently as they falter. The thoughts you plant are not foreign. They are fragments of their own mind, carefully rearranged. You twist logic against them, exposing contradictions they buried beneath bravado, amplifying doubts they thought dormant. They feel it, the shadow of their own fear, growing in corners they never intended to illuminate. Every plan they make feels heavier, each step uncertain. They start to hesitate, to second guess, to look behind them for a presence that does not exist. Yet it does, only differently than they imagined. It is the presence of insight they cannot yet claim, the awareness that someone, or something, sees the machinery of their mind and waits. You watch as they struggle to align their thoughts, as if assembling a puzzle with pieces that no longer fit. And in that struggle, you are both witness and architect. Time stretches, elongates, as you trace the rhythm of their panic, the subtle tremor behind their composure. You do not interfere with force. Force is vulgar, influence is subtle, and you are meticulous. Like water carving stone, your effect is slow, persistent, inevitable. Their reality warps around the edges of your perception. They remember moments differently, interpret events with suspicion, and question motives that never existed. You feed the fractures not with lies, but with reflection. Every shadow you expose is one they cast themselves. They feel watched, not by eyes, but by the weight of their own mind, and they cannot shake it. And yet, in the quiet chaos you orchestrate, there is a strange clarity. You recognize the ancient pattern, the predator who strikes with thought alone, the silent hand shaping destiny without exposure. Power is not in confrontation. Power is the knowledge of the cracks before the fall, the anticipation of weakness before it reveals itself. You are a keeper of that knowledge. You are both invisible and omnipresent, a whisper that reshapes, a shadow that teaches without words. Their mind bends not because it must, but because it was always fragile, always waiting for the careful pressure you now apply. You are the unseen force, the balance between chaos and control, and in that liminal space, you redefine what it means to hold dominion over another. You feel it before they do, the subtle shiver, the hesitation that flares and fades in the space between their words. Every carefully measured glance, every faltering gesture, is a tremor in the fragile architecture of their confidence. They were statues once, polished and immovable, armored in the illusion of certainty, but now cracks spider across that surface, thin yet unstoppable, and you watch as their foundations quietly give way. A pause stretches longer than it should, and their breath catches. You hold the moment silent, deliberate. You do not push, you allow gravity to do what force never could. The room hums with the tension you have sound, and in that silence, you see the flicker of self-doubt ignite, consuming the bravado that once surrounded them like a shield. Their eyes dart, seeking validation where none exists. Every instinct they rely upon falters under the weight of unspoken truths. Words stumble like stones over one another, tumbling into gaps they never intended to leave. You notice the tremor in their hands, the subtle shift in posture, as if the very air you occupy has grown heavier, denser. Pressing down with invisible intent, they try to recover, to reconstruct the mask they wore with ease, but the fragments no longer fit. Your presence, unmarked and ethereal, has traced every weakness and amplified it, a quiet observer orchestrating collapse without interference. It is the unseen hand that fractures the mirror, the shadow that turns light against itself. They remember 100 times when they thought themselves untouchable. Power was a language they spoke fluently, and fear was a currency they collected from others. Yet now their mastery betrays them, revealing an ancient truth: control is a fragile illusion, and perception a weapon sharper than steel. You watch as hesitation stretches into panic, as arrogance falters into confusion. The room holds its breath, a stage upon which their inner chaos plays out in full, unaided clarity. Every step they take to reclaim composure falls into the void you've quietly created, and each misstep is magnified by the weight of realization that they have been unmade by an intelligence they never recognized. And in the final moment, the pivot occurs. Their voice cracks, their gaze falters, their carefully constructed self-image dissolves, leaving only a raw human core exposed to your observation. It is here, in this sacred fracture, that you witness the alchemy of psychological transformation. The weak become aware of their weakness, the proud face their fallibility, and the walls of certainty crumble under a gravity older than reason itself. You remain unblinking, a silent force that reshapes the landscape of their mind without a touch, a whisper of inevitability, a reminder that power is not always seen, but always felt in the echo of what has been broken. You feel it before they do, the subtle shift, a flicker in their gaze, the imperceptible hesitation in a word they thought was sure. You are no longer just a participant in the room. You are the shadow that moves between the edges of perception, the quiet force that bends reality without a sound. Others speak, gesture, plead for attention, but you remain untouchable, still observant, calculating. Every heartbeat, every glance, every tremor of pride that they cling to becomes a thread in a web only you can see, only you can manipulate. They do not know you exist, and that is the difference between their chaos and your control. The power is not in confrontation. It is in the silent endurance of knowing, in the cold comprehension of what others cannot admit. They are fragile. Their confidence is armor, yes, but it is paper, thin against a mind trained to watch, to wait, to exploit the unspoken. You have learned to bend light and shadow alike, to stand in the darkness and let the world misread your absence as weakness. That absence, that stillness, is a blade. Every pause you allow, every word you withhold, becomes a calculated strike. They sense it subconsciously, feel it in the back of their throat, in the tightening of their chest, and they cannot fight what they cannot see. You have become an archivist of human frailty, a collector of the moments when pride falters and certainty crumbles. Each interaction is a manuscript, each encounter a cipher. You read the patterns in silence and hesitation, in micro-expressions they believe are meaningless. The room vibrates with unspoken truths that only you can hear. Power no longer requires volume, or spectacle, or dominance. It is distilled into precision, into knowing which word, which pause, which glance will fracture their armor entirely. And when it happens, they will not even recognize it as defeat. It will feel like their own mind betraying them, their own instincts turning traitor. Yet the weight of this knowledge is not without its gravity. You see the reflection of what you could become if indulgence overcame restraint. There is a lineage to this power, an ancient pulse that whispers of kings, of tacticians, of silent observers whose influence shaped kingdoms without drawing swords. You hold that pulse now, steady and unwavering. You do not wield it recklessly. You are the curator of shadows, the one who understands that true mastery is invisible, uncelebrated, eternal. And in that understanding, you are changed. You see the world in layers and secret structures of fear and ambition. You recognize the betrayal before it occurs, the panic before it manifests, and still, you remain the quiet presence, the keeper of shadows, untouched by the chaos you command, yet inseparably bound to the consequences of what others cannot even name.